Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on stress management, particularly through this time, this difficult period of this pandemic that's affecting us all. We'll be exploring stress. And so for the first part of this presentation, I'll be exploring with you in terms of what is stress and how that impacts us. And in the second part of this presentation, we'll be exploring different strategies to help us cope with stress and respond to stress more effectively. This is a pre-recorded session, so I'll be joining you in about 40 minutes live, where we'll be able to exchange your thoughts, your reactions, your questions on the presentation, and maybe perhaps explore and taking this just a bit further. So without further ado, we'll get into our presentation and we'll see you in about 40 minutes. So who am I? Most of my experience, I've been a senior manager and executive director in a number of non-for-profit organizations with a focus in terms of intellectual disability or mental illness. That's been my focus throughout most of my life. In the past while, I'm a facilitator. You could see that I'm a certified professional facilitator. I also have a master's in human systems intervention. I do a lot of work with emotional intelligence and certified in terms of a tool called Trust at Work. So a lot of my focus is getting people to work more effectively together, to communicate more effectively together, and to really accept differences as possibilities of growth, and actually even to reframe conflict as a possibility of growth and learning something new. So in terms of stress management, I've lived through and led a number of major organizational amalgamations, transformations. That was kind of my area of specialty in terms of the different nonprofits that I worked in. And as you can well imagine, just helping people through those significant changes, those transformations, where the anxiety and the stress level is high. So I'm pulling from that a lot of my experience to hopefully provide you with some guidance in terms of what stress management and how we can best deal with stress management. So without further ado, we'll get into the presentation in terms of what is stress. So stress is a biological and psychological response experience on encountering a threat that we feel we do not have the resources to deal with. So we respond. It's a physical response. You'll see that it's an emotional, physical, and overall response when we feel that we're threatened. So a stressor is the stimulus or the threat that causes the stress. The exam, a divorce, the death of a loved one, moving house, loss of a job, social distancing, having to change the way that we do things every day. So our typical response is, and you see that in terms of the brain research, what we learn is that in front of a threat, our typical response is to either fight or flight. When situations appear threatening to us, our bodies, even if we don't even realize that we're reacting in that way, our bodies react quickly to protect us by preparing to take action. This physiological reaction is known as the fight or flight response. The physiological response to a stressor is known as reactivity. We react. It's something that we see anytime we feel like, even when we're driving, somebody cuts us off, and so we react. So that's just a natural thing. So a physiological response can accumulate and result in long-term wear on the body. When we're in a situation where we can't effectively deal with the situation, where we're constantly in a flight or fight mode, that's where we feel we have to kind of be because of the stressor, that can have a long-term wear effect on the body. It actually shows up in our body. We can get sick, we can get physically sick. We can develop pain in our body. So stress is quite a fascinating thing because it manifests itself not just in our heads and our thoughts and our reactions, but also in our body. So what makes something stressful? Just think about it yourself. Like, what makes it stressful? What, even in terms of this pandemic, when you think about the pandemic, is it the pandemic that is stressful? Or is it working from home? Or is it the loss of employment, the loss of money, the uncertainty of when we can get back to work, of how things are going to be? So the situations and pressures that cause stress are known as stressors. Those are the stressors. We usually think of stressors as being negative, such as working all the time or being in a difficult relationship. Anything that puts high demands on you can be stressful. This can also include positive events. So we can see that there's also such things as positive stress, such as getting married, buying a house, going to college, receiving a promotion, changing, assuming a different role, a more senior role in an organization. And of course, not all stress is caused by external factors. Stress can also be internal or self-generated. I would say that quite a lot of stress is internal and self-generated. Again, not meaning that there's nothing external threatening to us or causing the stress or impacting us in a stressful way, but how we respond to it. So it's when you worry excessively. I'll give you an example, how worried excessively about something that may or may not happen. I don't know if any of you ever have any irrational, pessimistic thoughts about life. It's quite easy to do that these days. You go outside. I quite laugh because I keep thinking 2 meters or 6 feet in Ottawa translates into 26 feet or 30 feet. I'm quite surprised at how somebody will cross the street when they see me coming. And I keep wanting to pull my ruler out and say that's 6 feet. And I realize with the information that we get all of the time, is it 6 feet? Is it 18 feet? It's quite interesting in terms of what that causes when we get that information, particularly uncertain information. So it's easy to have these pessimistic and these irrational thoughts in terms of seeing people as threats, seeing others as threats, when in fact, very often they are. We have to protect ourselves. So, it's all of a sudden shopping is a very stressful situation through this pandemic. Simply interchanging with somebody. If somebody rings the doorbell, should I answer? Why is somebody ringing my doorbell? So it's quite interesting in terms of that. So, not all stress is bad. This stress, this refers to the bad type of stress, the opposite of eustress, which is what we're going to be looking at afterwards, and occurs when we have excessive adaptive demands placed on us. This occurs when the demands placed on us are so great that they lead to bodily and mental damage. This stress can be damaging, especially if it's excessive or pathogenic, disease-producing stress. We see in research that stress can lead to disease. Quite fascinating in terms of, so our bodies are interconnected. They're not, there isn't just what happens bodily, physically, emotionally, psychologically. So examples of distress can include financial difficulties, conflicts in relationships, excessive obligations, managing a chronic illness, or experiencing a trauma. And I could say that these days, there's a lot of collective stress due to the pandemic. The example I was giving to you earlier, when we walk down the street, some people cross the street. Other times we see a group of young people, 5 or 6 young people together. And somebody actually yesterday when I was walking by, somebody called over to me and said, look over at that table. And there were a group of young people having a picnic. And they said, do you think they know what 6 feet are? And I smiled and I realized, oh my God, if I start getting into worrying about them, about how dangerous what they were doing, because I could see she wanted to go over and speak to them. And I simply turned to her and I said, as long as you understand and you know what 6 feet are, then you'll be okay, you know. So it's quite fascinating in terms of this collective stress that we're living. And throughout this stress, you know, that we can also see that not all stress is bad. Eustress is the good type of stress, the opposite of distress, and refers to the optimal amount of stress, which helps promote health and growth. Many times, stressful events push us to perform higher levels and excel. This is eustress. Examples of eustress includes graduating from college, getting married, receiving a promotion, or changing jobs. Again, when I look at this pandemic, I'm so struck every day when I go out for a walk of how many young families are together, laughing, cycling together, walking together. And it's quite interesting how through this difficult period of time, these very positive things, how they're using the situation to really, really look at, here's how we're going to respond to the situation. So it's quite fascinating in terms of the positive signs around us. So there's, you know, even the stress that we're faced with, sometimes the way that we respond is, so the pandemic isn't a good type of stress, but the way that we respond is an excellent type of stress. But eustress is when there's something positive that happens in our life, simply changing. I remember, and I provided this example the other day to a group, moving from Montreal to Ottawa. I got a promotion, I had a new job, and how stressful that was, adapting to Ottawa. I was so used to Montreal, grew up in Montreal, being an immigrant. Montreal was just a wonderful place to grow up, and then coming to Ottawa and realizing how different Ottawa was. So that was quite, it's pushed me to grow, to understand. So I could look back and say, that was a good type of stress. I learned a lot about myself, a lot about relocating my family. And we discovered capacities that we didn't know that we had. So a stress response, all of us respond to stress. A good example of a stressful situation for many people is taking a test. Now, some of you may not have been in university for a while. I teach part-time at the university. And I could tell you, test time is incredibly stressful. I get tons of questions. And I look at the way different people cope with it. So you may, if you remember, you may notice some physical, behavioral, mental, and emotional response. What physical response? I could see people sweating. I could see people holding tight to their pens. What's the behavioral response? People are so focused that they can't pay attention. They just walk right in. What's the mental response? I could see people struggling with, how am I going to pass? Am I going to pass? What grade am I going to get? Am I going to know the responses to all this? And the emotional response in terms of some of the distress that could set in terms of that. And so it's just an example, a simple example of how just simply taking a test, preparing this. So all of the situations, a new job, when you think of it, is incredibly stressful for people too. If you look at this pandemic, working from home, I'm a facilitator, and as I say, I teach part-time at the university, and I'm a facilitator. I love to be in a group of people, in front of a group of people. I can read group behavior, individual people in the group, and adapt my presentation to the group. That's one of my strengths. That's one of the things I do really well. Right now, I don't see you, so I'm working from home, and I'm presenting these webinars. And I'm hoping that you're going to learn something from it. I'm hoping that this is going to be useful for you. But it's quite, particularly when I started, quite stressful because I don't have that response in front of me. I'm not sure sometimes how to proceed in terms of, so when you don't have a response, things are changing because of this pandemic. Have any of you had to go on an elevator recently. And I don't know if you noticed, I was on an elevator the other day, and the security guard that came in and said to me, the first response was, "Do you mind if I join you on the elevator?" I thought, this is so incredible how just taking an elevator has become a stressful thing in terms of, can we face each other? Should we not face each other? Are you wearing a mask? Are you not wearing a mask? If you've noticed, some people are much more vulnerable to stress than others. So what are some of your own observations about yourself and others as we live through this pandemic? What do you notice? I talked to you about people crossing the street when they're seeing me in terms of that. I also notice that sometimes when I start into a conversation with somebody, there's a real need to continue the conversation. I see so many people talking to each other about 6 to 10 feet apart, staying there for half an hour, 45 minutes. What are some of your own observations in terms of the way that different people are coping with this pandemic? Just take a moment just to reflect on that. Do you notice the individual differences? Do you see the different types of responses to the same situation? So this indicates that all of us don't respond in the same way to stress. So we have very different ways of responding to stress. So I'm going to ask you once again now that you've thought of others and noticing others, what's stressful for you at this moment? What do you notice about your thoughts, about what's going on in your head in terms of that? How are things at home? How are things at work? My wife is working from home. She works for the government, so every day she works from home, and every day she has a meeting with her team. And then they determine what they're going to be doing for the day and continue doing. At first, it was incredibly stressful. It's not an easy way to connect with people, seeing each other on Zoom. They haven't seen each other now in over 2 months. Or do any of you, or do you know somebody around you who's ill? My sister is quite ill, is suffering through some treatment for cancer. She's afraid to go to the hospital. She lives in Montreal. So just going to the hospital now, which used to be something that she looked forward to in terms of her treatment, is incredibly stressful. Has this impacted you financially? So for each person around you, particularly if you're a leader, this pandemic has affected different aspects of their life. Am I aware of it? Do I know what somebody is finding very difficult? School. Just for those of you who have children. My neighbors next door have their 2 teenage sons at home, and they both work from home. Both of their jobs are quite secure, both of them. They feel this is really wonderful. Across the street, one is a healthcare worker, and it's incredibly stressful what they're living through in terms of that. So somebody has to stay at home with the children there. So this has created quite a number of stressful situations. When you think about the people around you, are you aware of the way that this is impacting them? Are you aware of the way this is impacting you? So why do we stress out? We stress out for 2 major reasons. We perceive a situation as dangerous, difficult, or painful, and we don't believe we have the resources to cope. Those are 2 fundamental. When we perceive a situation as dangerous and we don't feel that we have the capacity to cope, that's where those stress are. So what are your red flags? Each one of us has warning signals, warning signs that stress is creeping into your life. So when you feel that things aren't going your way, you may feel like you're losing control or overwhelmed. Pay attention to the warning signs. These are just some of the signs that your body is telling you that it needs maintenance and extra care. So just think of it this, because often the warning signs manifest themselves physically. We feel it in our bodies. So I find that quite fascinating that I have a part of my back that really acts up whenever I go through quite a bit of stress in terms of that. So that's why some of the ways to kind of help cope with stress, you'll see later on, is actually taking care of our bodies. Do you tend to overeat? Do you tend to, when another stress warning signal is when you're in front of the TV for hours and you don't relax? So those are just some of the ways that your body is telling you that these are just some of the signals that things are not well. Can you recognize when things are not well? Do you become short-tempered? Do you wish that people wouldn't say certain things? So those are all warning signs that we're not well. So when you recognize those warning signs, it's quite a fascinating thing in terms of paying attention to them. So we've talked about stress, what causes stress, what stress is, some symptoms, the different ways of responding to stress, the impact of stress on our bodies, and recognizing those signals. And now I want to go with you, talk with you about looking at some suggestions for reducing stress. The most fundamental, one of the most fundamental ways is to find a support system. Is to find people around you, to surround yourself with people or some people that you can talk to about your feelings and your experiences. Just think in terms of yesterday, if you think about just yesterday, did you have a chance to talk about some of what you're experiencing and some of what you're feeling? And I'm not simply talking about work, I'm talking about what's really going on inside of you, because that's one way. And this is where we have things reversed. We often tell ourselves that we shouldn't feel certain things. And I'm going to suggest to you that it's the opposite. That very, very often it's when we work through our feelings that we can get to the other side of it, as opposed to trying to pretend that we shouldn't have feelings. So I'll give you an example, is when I know that sometimes when I'm not feeling too well, and I start having those kind of negative thoughts about how people are not appreciating what I'm doing, or that I wish I would get a bit more recognition for something. I find that really, really useful to speak, to talk about that with my wife. We could speak, and as I talk about that, what I notice is as I'm able to articulate those feelings, it kind of minimizes and dampens the feelings down. It makes me realize, oh, I'm just overly reacting. That what research shows is when you talk about your feelings, that's what dampens them down. When you start telling yourself that you shouldn't feel something, that's what strengthens them. And that's what a support system. A support system often just acknowledges how you feel, accepts how you feel, and just really lets you know that it's okay to feel that way. It's all right to feel quite a bit of distress through this pandemic. You're not alone. This is not unusual to kind of, when we live through uncertainty, every part of us is responding, in a very difficult kind of way. And as human beings, we need certainty, and we're living through an incredible amount of uncertainty. So it's really important more than ever. And even if it's not to try to resolve it, but simply just to name it. A second suggestion for reducing stress, we could say, is to change your attitude. Find other ways to think about stressful situations. Life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how we react to it. It's quite interesting. So when we talk about changing your attitude, it's not about changing the situation. The situation remains. It's an external thing outside of you, but it's how you respond to it. So I'll give you an example. We talked about that earlier. When I look at the way that a lot of people are responding, there are so many positive things that I'm seeing now. I'm meeting neighbors that I didn't even know I had. Everyone is walking today. So I'm connecting with people, and I see people and I keep realizing, oh my God, they live on the same street. I never even realized they did that because we're in our busy lives in terms of all that. So there are some really positive things in terms of that, saying it doesn't change the situation. It doesn't change the reality of the pandemic. I'm starting to enjoy offering the webinars. It's a very relaxing, much more relaxing thing for me. And starting to get into a bit of a groove in terms of what does it mean to provide information in this way. Still uncomfortable with it, but at least it's helping me look at this in a very, very different way in terms of being much more positive about the possibilities of this. Another suggestion for reducing stress is be realistic. I don't know if you've realized that working from home, a lot of people in this lockdown are taking longer to respond to emails. I'll send an email to somebody and I'm noticing that I don't get an immediate response, that it sometimes takes a long time to get a response in terms of that. And I believe it's because of a lot of what we're doing is we're being a bit unrealistic with ourselves. When we're living through stress, we're much less efficient. We're just, we need to take time to really work things through. So just be realistic with yourself. Develop realistic expectation of yourself and others. Have any of you been frustrated with a package that hasn't arrived? That you've ordered something and all of a sudden you get that email that says, due to this pandemic, we can't guarantee when we're going to be able to deliver it. And then when you call the helpline, you find out that they're saying to you, we can't answer your helpline. We have to they put you on hold for 3-4 hours. Well, the reality is this pandemic has caused, I don't think anyone thought this through. This is an ever evolving situation. So if you want to find yourself, one of the most important ways to reduce the stress is be realistic about what you can expect from others, from yourself, and from others. This is a difficult situation. Another suggestion for reducing stress is to get organized and to take charge. I find this is quite a fascinating one because one of the things that's been occurring and has been occurring quite frequently in the past while is I find myself saying, well, I'll do that tomorrow. And I don't know if you've had that experience where putting something off and saying, I'll do that tomorrow, all of a sudden tomorrow comes and I haven't done it. And I say, well, I'm still working from home. So maybe on Saturday, I'll get a bit of a chance to do that. One of the things that happens is when we're in a situation like this, it becomes even more important to plan your time, make a schedule, and establish your priorities. One of the things that I've noticed that really, really helps me is when I say, I'll do that tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and I'll put that in my calendar. I'll have that meeting at 11:30. I'll call that person at that time and put that into the calendar. And I find that that's been very, very helpful in terms of being able to take the time and to schedule it to know that I can accomplish something. It becomes incredibly important in terms of that. Another suggestion for reducing stress is to take breaks and give yourself me time. This is really important. Is learning that taking time to yourself for rejuvenation and relaxation is just as important as giving time to other activities. What's a me time? So And here it says basically at minimum, take breaks, short breaks during your busy day. I find it incredible all of a sudden how my day gets incredibly busy. And this is a real challenge for many of us. What does it mean to take me time where I'm with myself, I'm with my thoughts, I'm taking some time to do some internal stuff in terms of what are the things that I'm thinking about, what are the things that I'm feeling, what are some of the things that are important to me at this time. So I find what I've done, again, going back to the point before, is I've scheduled a time where I go for a walk in the woods here. In terms of my house is right next to a forest. So every day I take some time just for myself. No headsets, no music, just for myself, just to kind of pay attention as I go for myself. It varies anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes. And I'll often take a break during the day away from my computer, away from the screen, just to kind of be with myself and enjoy my coffee, enjoy whatever it is that I'm doing. Another suggestion, continuing on suggestions for reducing stress, is take good care of yourself. We will talk a little bit more about this, about eating properly and getting a regular rest and keep a routine. You start seeing how all of those different pieces are really important. And every day, make sure that you do something that you really, really enjoy. The time we need to take care of ourselves the most when we are stressed is the time we do it the least. Whenever we're stressed, it's so easy to forget about ourselves and to take care of ourselves. And what does that mean, really, to take care of yourself in terms of to eat properly? So I want to take us through some of that. What does it mean to really, really do some of those things? So eat properly, get regular rest, keep a routine. Learn to say no. Learning to pick and choose which things you will say yes to and which things you will not. It's quite fascinating to just jump at everything that occurs these days. But just learning to simply say, I don't feel that this is a good thing for myself to be doing at this point. So protect yourself by not allowing yourself to take on every request or opportunity that comes your way. Think a bit longer term. How is this going to impact me in just a while in terms of that? This is very difficult to learn to say no in times of uncertainty. I find this particularly challenging. If I say no to this occasion or to this opportunity, will I have one later on? But yet being well and making sure that I'm taking time and that I'm available to myself and to the others around me becomes incredibly important. That's why learning, so it's not learning to say the word no. Many of us know how to say no, but it's learning to say yes to certain things and to say I cannot respond at this time to something. So it's never just a direct no, but it's learning how to set those boundaries and to those limits. Get regular exercise. Do you take time? How many times do you go during the week where you treat your body, where you take care of your body? So exercising regularly can help relieve some symptoms of depression and stress and help us to maintain our health. This is actually research-based. I can tell you that one of the things that happens for myself is whether I go for a run or whether I go for a walk, I feel very differently at the end of the run or the walk as I did at first. There's something really magical about being in our bodies and exercising and just really focused on running, just focused on walking. That helps us kind of a lot of those thoughts, those negative thoughts, kind of dissipate as we do that, and really, really to be comfortable listening to ourselves, or breathing and walking and stuff like that. So exercising regularly. Do you do that? What kind of regime do you have in your life where you exercise regularly? And as I talked about earlier, This is a really important one. Eat a healthy diet. More and more and more, as I was listening to Bill Maher on TV, who was speaking with somebody who was saying that they got sick in an Asian country and went to see the doctor. And the first question that the doctor asked was, "What are you eating?" And the person was saying, this is the first time that any doctor started an interview by saying, "What are you eating?" as opposed to "What are your symptoms?" or "Where's it hurting?" And because what the person was trying to say, what the doctor was saying is, how you eat impacts how you are. It really is fundamental. And again, research is indicating that this is so true, that eating a healthy diet is key to reducing stress and being well. And I think it's really important. So just think a little bit about your own eating habits, what you do during the day. About 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with diabetes and changed my diet, very attentive to what I eat and very attentive to the exercise. And my diabetes has not reoccurred for the past 20 years. As a matter of fact, my blood sugar levels are quite low since that time. So I can attest that this is true. Eating a healthy diet combined with regular exercise has an incredible beneficial effect and helps reduce the stress. Get a hobby, do something different. Do you like to read? Do you like movies? Do you write? What are some of the things? Encourage others around you. What else do they do? They're not just workers. They're also, what are some of the passions that people have in their life? People love to knit. People love music, love to paint. So it's really important to have a balanced lifestyle, because I feel that we overly stress work. So that's that shift from moving from doing to being, learning to be who we are and follow some of our passions, and not just always to be in a doing mode where we're just performing. We talked about this earlier, and I want to repeat this. Slow down. Know your limits and cut down the number of things you do every day, even though we're not doing too much, particularly if you don't have enough time for them or for yourself. Be realistic about what you can accomplish effectively every day. Some of us in leadership are more busy than we've ever been before because of this pandemic. This is really important then, to really, really monitor your pace. Rushing through things can lead to mistakes and poor performance. Take the time you need to do a good job. Poorly done tasks can lead to added stress. So learn to slow down and be realistic. This is an interesting one. It's laugh and use humor. Do something fun and enjoyable, such as seeing a funny movie, laughing with friends, reading a humorous book, or going to a comedy show. This is a wonderful quote. It says basically, a book dies every time you watch a reality show. So it's just quite interesting in terms of how we need to, as human beings, to be able to have that joy or that fun inside of us manifest and be part of what we live. So I quite enjoy. One of the things that I do, that I have to say that I love connecting with my granddaughter who lives in a different city through Skype. She's 3 years old, and I have to say that is one of the most fun and enjoyable things I ever see. I mean, I've been enjoying some of the more funny things around how people are responding to this pandemic in terms of that. Learn to relax. Develop a regular relaxation routine. Try yoga, meditation, or simply some quiet time. We hear of mindfulness, of meditation. That's just a regular practice for myself. Every day I take a number of maybe 15, 20 minutes to just be attentive to my breath and to do some simple meditation. I see the impact that has. I'll see the impact how that prepares me to receive whatever is going to occur that day. That ability to relax and then to allow things to emerge as they're emerging, as opposed to that stress that I often feel around wanting things to be a certain way, how that meditation, that quiet time for myself is really, really important. And then relaxation exercises, deep breathing. It's quite fascinating when you take a bit of time. I would suggest that you do this a number of times during the day, just to take a minute or two at regular periods of the day where you simply sit with yourself. You could try it right now. You take 2 or 3 deep breaths. You see the impact that that has. I find that really useful sometimes in the middle of really stressful situation, exchange with somebody, just to take a moment to take a deep breath. And then how that changes, how our body relaxes and how we respond. Visualization is a nice way of giving our minds and body a mini vacation. Sometimes a guided meditation where somebody invites us to reflect on being in a place that we really, really enjoy. How that gives us a sense of moving away from what we're living into a different reality, to come back into our present reality in a much more relaxed way. And muscle relaxation. There's a number of exercises, breathing exercises, that help us to relax our muscles. There's a number of different things that you could be doing to physically relax our muscles. So again, think about a situation, just to kind of to end this presentation. Think about a situation or situations that is particularly stressful to you today. What is it? And based on the information that we talked about, what are some of the things you could be doing more of or focusing more on so that can help you deal with the situation? Just in summary, try to change the way you appraise the situation, and that'll make it less stressful. Remember that stress is normal, but watch out for symptoms of stress. Use coping skills, ways to reduce stress. Practice relaxation techniques. Those are some of the ways, some of the summaries that we're doing that. And as you hear my dog barking in the background, I'm trying to be attentive to you and not be stressed with the dog barking. So hopefully that did not distract you. So thank you. And now at this point, I'll be joining you for our presentation and our discussion.